Hello there, dear viewer, and welcome to the Elemental builds. For the last entry, me and PC Outcast have the Ayleid element of light, not fire, light. It's completely different and it makes a lot of sense. Stop asking questions, just consume videos. I called him DUSKBLADE because he's a little bit like a night blade, but with sun spells. Ain't that clever? The core idea is to show a redeemed villain used to manipulating the darkness and the forces of the night, but now being drawn to the light and the sun and good, honest undead slaying. Combat-wise, you will go with a sword and a staff most of the time, dual casting many self-targeting spells in between fights. For once I opted against Okato's recital since I wanted to use the worship of Magnus. It blocks your magicka regeneration, but makes all spells much cheaper, making dual casting much more viable, especially that we will absorb magicka in more than a few ways, completely offsetting the lack of magicka regeneration. I combined quite a few of the most balanced Triumvirate spells and Summermyst enchantments, so the build should be perfectly balanced, yes. The DUSKBLADE used to be a Thalmor Justiciar with a scholarly background. He was a perfect tool for the Dominion to track down heretics and dissidents. He also had an unhealthy fascination with the ancient elven cultures, particularly Ayleid's. He even dabbled in necromancy and shadow magic for a bit, as Ayleid's produced so many liches and necromancers. He got assigned to track a fugitive in Hammerfell, and since it was close to the border of Cyrodiil, he hoped to take a little detour on his way back to explore some Ayleid ruins. But he was captured, his team was slaughtered, and he himself was held for ransom by local bandits. Some time later, he was rescued by a human mercenary. Beautiful, agile and skilled with her bow, he asked her to escort him to Cyrodiil, to an Ayleid ruin. And as they traveled together, his view of humans changed gradually. He respected and liked her by the time they arrived at the ruin. In the ruin they found spell tomes and magic treatises and prophecies, among which was one about an ancient king rising from the chaotic depths of the sea to terrorize the motherland of men. He decided to learn the ways of manipulating sun and light against the undead, and prepare himself to make some good name for the Altmer in the land of Skyrim, which has little reason to appreciate them. Wow, interconnected backstory universe, did you notice? Now, here's the load order. We need Vokrii, classic classes and Birtsigns, Triumvirate, Odin, Reliquary of the Myth, Oblivion artifact pack, and Noldor content pack for the magnificent looks. I know I am using the armor for the second time in the project, but I can't find any Ayleid armor sets. There is a helmet and bruma, but not a full set, so I pretend this is some sort of Ayleid design, and it is really beautiful. Reliquary and Oblivion artifacts are used for one item each, but they are rather important. Odin spells won't show up in the video too often because they are overshadowed by Triumvirate spells late game, but quite a few will be useful, like the Hallowed Strikes to use your restoration skill offensively. Classic classes is not used for a class actually, although you could consider Spell Sword or a Nightblade or a Pilgrim or whatnot. But my main reason to use it was the Atronach Birthsign, which is very cool, slightly stronger than the Vanilla Stone. It gives you 100 more magicka and 50% chance to absorb incoming spells. One of the great many ways this build deals with the lack of magicka regeneration. Now for the attributes spread, which is roughly 4 points of health per 3 of stamina. Magicka will be handled through the High Elf bonus, Alter Self perk, Birth Sign and 45 magicka enchantment, and with a drastic reduction of spell cost gained by following Magnus in Winter Sun. So the birth sign instead of a standing stone is the Atronach, which as mentioned allows us to invest nothing in magicka, and the worship of Magnus will make no magicka investment even more viable by cutting all spell costs by 75%. Have I mentioned this build is a perfectly balanced build? For the main skills we have one-handed, light armor, restoration, destruction, alteration, enchanting and smithing. Yes, I know, I will make a non-crafting build soon enough, just chill, alright? Okay. In one-handed we take all the sword perks and all the power attack perks on the right. Although you may safely skip Valorous Charge if you wish, because you have your staff, which you can use at some range. You don't need to close up the gap at all, but rather you can spray your magic goo for as long as the enemies are approaching or are out of melee reach. Due to relatively high stamina, Furious Strength will increase your damage output at the start of the combat at least, and it will be a noticeable change. So this creates a rather interesting playstyle where you start with your Staff of Magnus, then once they get in melee range you execute a powerful power attack, or a few of them, and only if they are still standing. Somehow you need to use the mobility of the light armor perks, which are on the screen right now. I went for a minimal investment, just mastery, fit and training to get the maximum armor rating easier and get more mobility. Agility will be a bit useful because of Furious Strength, and the Windrunner was taken mostly because I like movement speed. There is literally nothing else in the build. Maybe you can use one spell increasing movement speed. It's hardly needed given the combat style, so you may skip this perk as well if you wish. There's only 6 perk points dropped into Restoration, but they matter quite a lot, especially Sun's Judgment. The Duskblade doesn't like using elemental magic other than the shadow and the light, so restoration spells are going to be your main source of damage. Stendarr's Aura will become a useful tool against all kinds of enemies once the perk is taken. Before that, Harm can be used to damage enemies with healing spells. Meanwhile, in Destruction we only need dual casting and 3 ranks of raw power to enhance our shadow spells, such as my favorite Nightblade spell, or the incredibly balanced Draining Touch spell, yet another way to steal health and magicka from the enemies. Meanwhile, in Alteration, our main goal is to reach the Atronach perk fast. Combined with items and birth sign and the Blessing of Magnus, it will produce a 100% spell absorption, a 100 and a bit, but the bit doesn't matter, and you don't even need to be a Breton for it, or wear Mirax clothes, which is why we only need the necessary 1 rank of magic resistance. Alter Self is used to increase magicka, of course. Battle Mage will be most useful before your Staff of Magnus and Staff perks are obtained, so I marked it optional. There is a bucket load of perks taken in the enchanting tree, including extra effect. Basically take everything but the scroll perks on the right. With Siphon and Squeezer perks and the Recharge Weapon enchantment, you will never ever have to worry about running out of batteries for your sword or your staff. Your main staff, the Staff of Magnus, will have its own beautiful magicka absorbing ward, working all the time when you are not attacking actually, so not all the time belly. This means combined with the Mana Shield perk, it becomes almost like a decent shield in terms of boosting your defense. Mana Stone will improve the enchantment on your weapon, which will become even more deadly on power attacks thanks to the Thunder Strike perk. Finally, in smithing, you need perks allowing you to craft the Noldor armor, so Steel and Elven smithing. With your high enchanting and some blacksmith's elixirs, reaching the maximum armor rating should be barely an inconvenience. So let's shed some light on the items and enchantments, as they are the cornerstone and the fundament of the build, and they are all perfectly balanced, with a very subtle effect on your combat efficiency. Yes, Belly, subtle.
This is called subtlety.
We need 2 unique items. The glorious Staff of Magnus, so you need to engage with the College of Winterhold questline and brave the Labyrinthian. It will absorb magicka from the enemies, and after it is depleted, it will absorb health. With your perks, it is quite a lot of health, enough for you to stand and take a beating from the Draugr Death Lords for about a minute or so, while your spells are damaging them passively. The Sorcerer's Ring from Oblivion Artifact Pact will provide us with some extra magicka and 25% spell absorption. You can get it from the Hopsfall Cave, very appropriately inhabited by necromancers. Good location for an early adventure, especially on your way to or from the College of Winterhold. Then we need the Noldor Sword with absorb health and sun damage, combining vampiric magic and anti-undead magic in a single weapon. You should be able to absorb more than 60 points of health and deal 160 sun damage to undead with the build complete. And then we need a helmet of Fortify Magicka and Siphon Magicka, chest piece of Fortify Restoration and Windfall, gauntlets of Fortify One-Handed and Recharge Weapon, boots of Fortify One-Handed and Windfall, necklace of Amplify Destruction and Amplify Restoration. Siphon Magicka combines greatly with the ultimate OP spell of Death Shroud. Both of them will remove magicka faster, which means the Staff of Magnus will start absorbing health much faster. 2 items of Windfall with your unhealthy amounts of attribute absorbing effects mean you hardly ever need to worry about running out of any of the 3 attributes. The list of the most useful spells is rather long, since we don't need to worry about magicka spending, but since our passive, self-targeted spells are mostly cast with both hands, you will need an entire ritual between fights to reach your peak performance. You don't need to do all of this each time, but in a perfect scenario, pray with Spirit of Thornbriar and Nightblade spells equipped. This will cost nothing to cast and last up to 3 times longer than usual. That's already a huge buff. You will teleport on attacks, dealing up to 740 damage on contact, as well as the ongoing damage whenever you or your Spirit Guardian are hit. Yes, Spirit Guardian was used. He can carry a weapon decreasing magic resistance of his targets because balance. Then dual cast Stendarr's Aura, which will damage every type of enemies thanks to Sun's Judgment. Visions of Healing is yet another spell to dual cast, and it will randomly absorb up to 200 health from an enemy somewhere, and then the perfectly balanced spell of Draining Shroud, which will absorb 37 points of health and magicka in a rather large radius from enemies all over around you, and it is somehow not a cloak spell, so it stacks with Stendarr's Aura, and on top of all that, the power attack imbuing spell of Holy Shock is useful against anyone, but particularly against the undead. And before your items are all done and found, you can supplement this deadly set with Shadow Stride and Shadow Dance and maybe Draining Touch and maybe Life Tap from Odin. Sometimes some fast healing as well. So the end result is a character that can play like a tank, but also a little bit like a scout, and he absorbs health and magicka all the time, both actively and passively. He can never be hurt by magic, and he excels, therefore, at mage slaying, and at undead slaying, and at everything else slaying. He just wrecks everything, and the Staff and Sword combat style is rather enjoyable, especially with the overwhelmingly OP Staff of Magnus. Yeah, I like this one. I think maybe only my Sword Mage was dealing with enemies in a more spectacular and also efficient fashion, but this is nuts as well. It's just, there is no way to kill this dude, I don't think. For now, my watch has ended. Go watch PC Outcast's light build, and definitely thank you, PC, for yet another collab, which yet again inspired me to try some things I probably wouldn't try otherwise. And you, dear viewer, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, like, ring the bell, tell your grandpa about me, and we will see each other again. Bye bye.